So, hello everyone. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're looking after yourselves. Have you ever been given the wrong advice? Been told to expect one thing and then experience something completely opposite? Well, we're here to address this. Each episode, we're going to bring on a guest speaker from Brunel. This could be a current student or an alumni. And we're going to be discussing some assumptions we had or things that we were told to expect when we were at university and how this was completely different to what we went through. But don't worry, we're not going to end it there. We're not going to leave you in the doom and gloom. We're going to be offering some personal tips and advice on how you can make the most of uni and learn from our mistakes and our experiences. So to kick things off, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker. So, hi Jay, how you doing?
Hi everyone. Here I am again. Second time around.
The joke there is we unfortunately couldn't upload the previous version of this episode because with technology being the way it is, we recorded the whole thing and then lo and behold, it didn't work. The audio wasn't working. So, well, we just thought, why not come back, do it all over again, do it online this time, and just see how things go. But Jay, there might be some people in our audience who may remember your episode. There might be some that, you're a completely new face to them. And we'd just like to ask you first off, could you please just let us know a bit more about you?
Sure thing. So back then I was working at Brunel. I no longer am. I am just a Brunel alumni now. I graduated in 2022, yes, in aerospace engineering, and now I'm continuing my master's in astronautics and space engineering elsewhere. So I definitely was around for the last few years at Brunel. I was working with residences. I was working with the university in general. I did a lot with the union, a lot with a bunch of clubs. So you might have seen me around in past years.
Oh, perfect. And they might have also seen you in your podcast that you do. Could you let us know a bit more about that?
So there was a few episodes out. I am not too sure about the fate of it right now. It's called Let's Talk About It. We did a few episodes covering just general topics of a lot to do with just general well-being. We did one about coming into university from abroad, one about the general circumstances of living in university, making friends, how to get to know other people. I think there was one about sports and getting active. That was a recent one that we did. There might be a few more coming out soon, unsure. So we'll see.
Well, thank you. And yeah, I definitely would recommend to anyone watching or listening, it's a really great podcast. I've listened to it myself and watched it too, and it offers really good advice, and I guess shows you, I think especially because sometimes as a student you might forget that yes, some of the staff members who work at the university were students like you. They came to Brunel and they've had their own experiences, and they can offer really great advice on a wide range of topics. So we'll include the link to that in the description below. I definitely would recommend checking it out. With So No One Told You, we're always discussing things that no one told you about. And this time we're talking about postgraduate studies. Now, yes, postgraduate studies, we realized sort of like when we started recording this that there might be a few deadlines that have passed. There might be some that haven't. So please do make sure that you've checked, if you are thinking of doing postgraduate studies, that the university that you're applying for, or the courses you're applying for rather, they're still open, because kind of like, you didn't hear it, but sort of like we'll go into a bit more detail later on, is that they can go quite quickly. We're going to start off with the first assumption. Now, the first one I've got is you don't have to apply for a course until you graduate. So it sort of links with what we were saying before of, there's this assumption that you don't have to sort of like rush into looking for a postgraduate study. You can just finish your undergrad, wait, and then once you've submitted your dissertation, you've done all your exams, that's when you need to start like looking for courses. Jay, was that an assumption that you had, or something that you sort of felt that way?
It was not. I was very prepared and warned against this. Like you were saying, a lot of universities, they close on their vacancies for postgraduate quite early on. Even so, a lot of first waves, they tend to close around December time. So before we recorded, last time we recorded this, it would still be like you'd still be in time. So I think we're in second wave now, which is still a great opportunity to apply to a lot of postgraduate studies. I think it closes around March, I'm pretty sure, which is still a great way to get into a lot of universities. And it's something you should be looking into as soon as possible, really, because a lot of these things tend to go by really, really fast and you might just miss out on your opportunity. And this can be master's, PhD. PhD, they tend to be a bit more sporadic. They tend to come in throughout the year. So it's just something you have to be, have a, what's a good expression? Just have your eyes peeled for any opportunity that might come by. Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely agree. And, you sort of linked into the reality of the situation, like you mentioned, that a lot of them do close early. Some of them close, even like regardless of the course, they'll close earlier at some universities than they do at others. So it's very dependent on the university and the course that you're doing. I know even, when I was doing my, looking for postgraduates, it was the same thing of, there were some courses and I was like, oh, these seem kind of interesting. I'll sort of like wait to apply when there's more time. And like you said, I came back later and the course had already been filled, and there wasn't any spaces. So the advice that we've got here is, ideally you'd like to start looking at the start for a postgraduate course at the start of your final year, especially if you're looking to do, it's really nice that you mentioned there about that postgraduate studies doesn't just mean masters, that there are PhD programs that you can apply for. And a lot of them, accept undergraduate students, depending on like their grades or their sort of like career path as well. They're very open to having them. So I know that there was an environmental one that was recommended to me that it's a really great program. You get to sort of like try out new, like different sort of research areas in your first year before sort of committing to your dissertation for the next like 3 or 4 years. But yeah, I definitely recommend, start looking as early as possible and start applying as early as possible, because once those courses are filled, then it's very unlikely you'll be able to join that course, and you don't want to miss out on sort of the course that you want to do. We also sort of haven't. Oh, Jay, if you want to go ahead and say something,
Yeah,
go
I
ahead.
just wanted to say as well, because it's not just these types of courses, like you mentioned. You can even get into pre-masters, very similar to foundation year, for those of you who might have done it the year before, usually bachelor's. There's also a variety of masters. There's like master's of science, whatever. There's masters of philosophy, which is a research master's instead of a taught master's that usually can lead directly into a PhD, counting for the first year of a PhD usually. So there are quite a lot of opportunities, and all of these do tend to go by quite quickly. So it is something you do have to be quite like on it.
Yeah, thank you. And I think it's sort of links. It's not, well, it does link to where our next assumption is. But I also thought, because we haven't actually got it on the table, so I thought I'd put it there. Now's as good a time as any to mention it. Is, universities wherever you studied your undergraduate, will usually also most likely do a master's, and that might be somewhere that you might want to look into. You might want to see, depending on your career path and what you want to do afterwards. It might be something that you check out. Usually universities will offer some form of discount for you coming back to do a master's at the same place. So yeah, it's always about just being aware of like what's available to you. Look, I'm not saying that, you have to stay at your, the same university. I understand completely that depending on the subject that you sort of study for your undergrad, but also what you want to study for your master's, that you'll have to look at elsewhere. But just always, I'd say, just give it a check. There's a lot of like interesting courses that universities do anyways. And kind of like what you're saying there, Jay, that there's a wide range of really interesting masters in philosophy that do like really like incredible work. And like you said, it sort of leads on to a PhD. So if you know that academia is where you sort of want to get into, at least at the start of your professional career, then yeah, definitely check out all these different resources.
And a bit as what you mentioned as well, these if you do come back to the university you've graduated in already, there is a discount. So I think for now it's anywhere from 10 to 20% off that I think you get depending on which masters you'd be choosing. So I think for more engineering masters, I think it tends to be a bit less. But for like management, other things in that regard, it does tend to be a bit more. You do tend to get quite a bit more discount, which can be quite noticeable and quite a bit quite an advantage because masters are still they are all usually more costly than your average undergraduate year. So you do end up saving quite a bit by going to the same university again. If obviously you can handle staying there for a few more years. But it is good to diversify yourself sometimes. If you do have the chance, doing a master's elsewhere does do wonders for your portfolio and your curriculum. It does make it more diverse, which is something employers are really keen on looking at.
Yeah, thank you. I think, yeah, I keep saying before we go to the next one because sort of on what we were mentioning, I think there's an assumption that I completely forgot to put on the list, and I guess that assumption would be regarding more the student finance side of things. That you mentioned there that the discount at your university can be substantial, and it sort of got me thinking that there's the assumption because I'm pretty sure I didn't know about this when I was sort of started my masters. Was that there's the assumption that when it comes to student finance, the way that the payment scheme is set up is very similar to the undergraduate. So the university, directly sees your tuition fees for that year. And then you'll get money from student finance for like your living costs and things like that. When the reality is not that. It might change for the next academic year. I can't tell you, but essentially what it is now is that you pay your tuition fees, you also pay your living fees. So essentially, student finance will give you, it's the same as before, that they'll give you a set amount at different points of the year. But the thing that you might not know is that you have to be the one that's going directly to university and paying your tuition fees. It can be quite stressful, especially I know, for example, when I was doing my master's at Brunel, because my course was a 2-year course and it wasn't sort of like a commonly done thing. There was a bit of like a lot of work that I had to sort of go into figuring out like what my payment plan would be and like how much I'd be paying because I was doing a 2-year master's. So I'd say the advice for that is just, keep on top of it. I know for myself, I always put like reminders saying, this is when student finance is coming in. This is when the university is sort of expecting to receive the money, and just always just try and look so you can sort of keep ahead of the game. But yeah, I wanted to ask Jay, did you have any advice on this?
Oh, absolutely. So first of all, one of the biggest misconceptions people have, postgraduate loan is very different from undergraduate loan. So whereas in undergraduate, you have a tuition loan and a maintenance loan, and postgraduate is just the one thing for everything. And it tends to be much less than you'd be expecting. So for undergraduate loan, they usually pay for the whole tuition. And then the maintenance loan, you can get anywhere upwards of 12,000 a year. Whereas with postgraduate loan, you'll only get about 12,000 for everything, for tuition and anything else that you might need, which at times isn't even enough to cover a lot of master tuitions. The thing, I'm not too sure, but I'm pretty sure postgraduate loans you can only take out once as well. So it is.
Yeah, I think that's right. You can only essentially get it once, and that's it.
So I can imagine for 2-year master courses or for people who are wanting to continue into further education, maybe do a second master's, PhD after a master's, you will no longer have a student finance available for you to claim.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. I know with the 2-year, the masters, I know thankfully it was covered in the sort of student finance thing of they understand that like some masters have like a placement year, for example, like mine, or they might be sort of like taught over 2 years. So they do accommodate sort of that, and you're allowed to sort of get your payment plan is different, and that's where the confusion can happen sometimes with universities is they're sort of expecting you to be paying a certain amount, but then you have to, student finance know that you're doing a 2-year master's. So yeah, sometimes you have to do a bit of like talking to so many people, which I know, especially when you just start uni, that's the tendency that people don't want to have to do. But yeah, sometimes you have to do that. But kind of like what you're mentioning there, if you do, like you said, if you do a second master's or you want to sort of go, PhD, or you want to do more further education, that's unfortunately as soon as you've got your first maintenance loan for your master's or for postgraduate studies, then that's all essentially that you're getting, and you can't actually get any more for any additional stuff. But yeah, we're gonna go on to the next thing, which is you have to study a subject similar to your undergraduate. Now, Jay, you mentioned that you studied, I believe it was aeronautical engineering for your undergraduate. Is that correct?
Aerospace, yeah.
Aerospace.
So
Sorry
very
about that.
similar, but yeah.
Are you doing something very similar for your postgraduate studies, or are you doing something different?
In my case, I am doing something very similar. I am doing, this gives a continuation, a specialization in space side of aerospace. So that being astronautics and space engineering, which is very, very steered towards the whole space engineering side. Anything that it's basically you get to the point where you actually do rocket science. So, but it's which is something I know we're going to talk into for my course. Not everyone is actually from an aerospace background. You can actually have quite a bit of people just from very different backgrounds: computer science, physics, maths, even chemistries, things that aren't very related, biology as well, that aren't very related to engineering, but you can still do great. And it is for everyone, which is an assumption that I know we were going to talk about. Is it, can anyone do any course? Yeah, we'll get into it.
Yeah, no, you picked the right time. Yeah, you're definitely right. The reality is, you don't have to. You can do a master's in any subject that you want as long as you meet the grade requirements. So kind of like Jay was saying there, you might not have a background in engineering, but you could do engineering. I know Samuel, who's on the podcast. He did his undergraduate in, I believe it's politics and history. Hopefully, I got it right. But he did his master's in psychology because he sort of was working for, I think he said like 2 years or a year after he graduated, and he was just like, actually, I didn't really enjoy my degree that much. I actually really have a passion for like psychology and understanding the mind. And he did. He completely changed his undergrad. He loved his time doing psychology, which sort of leads to the advice, which is all about, research areas of study that you're interested in if you're thinking of doing a postgraduate study. Sort of don't limit yourself to just thinking about the subjects that link to your course. If you're doing, I don't know, so I like, without trying to like sell my masters, the reason why I liked my course was because even though it does deal with the environment, because it talks about sustainability, it also dives into entrepreneurship and design, which is something that I had no sort of understanding of before I did the masters. Like, I'd never done design before. Yes, I had like stuff like the podcast, but I didn't necessarily know that much about business side of things and entrepreneurial side of things. And I think it's just been really good to get that advice. To do a master's in something that you've never done is really interesting because you sort of gain skills and knowledge where I feel like in my undergraduate, it's not like I liked my undergraduate, I really did, but I feel like my master's sort of opened my eyes to things that I wouldn't have necessarily known if I hadn't done it. And I don't know if you feel the same way, Jay. But yeah, I just feel like that's without trying to sell that masters are amazing, everyone should do a masters. It's up to you and your personal preference. But I feel like doing it in some, like, learning about stuff that I didn't really know a lot about really helped me to see more side of things and see essentially like where you can go, I guess, into the working world with, even if it's like something completely different to your career. I think it sort of helps you to give the courage to do that, try something new and do new things. But yeah, did you feel like that, or do you feel like that? Sorry, Jay, with your masters.
I think masters is a great place to either do a career change to further a skill set that you're interested in, or just to get better qualifications, usually if you are continuing in the same area. It is a place where you can really develop, for example, a skill that you learned or that you might have been interested in and haven't had the chance to do too much. So, for example, in engineering, a big part of engineering in the industry isn't related necessarily to engineering. It's more to do with engineering management, sustainability, all these other things. So sometimes even doing a master's in something related, not exactly related, can give you a lot of great opportunities still in the field that you're looking to work. It can also just allow you to do full on a career change. It's something that you can just go into something very different. A lot of people I know do a master's just in business management. It's one that opens quite a bit of doors, gives you quite a bit of opportunities with that master's. In my case, my one does come to further my knowledge on, in this case, the space side of aerospace, which is the side I'm more passionate about in terms of research and development and all these things. But if I was to maybe do a different one, a different master's, I would definitely do maybe a master's in business and management. It's something that is very, very helpful. One thing I wanted to say as well, like during undergrad, it's a great time. Like you don't have to, although you're doing a course, there is a lot of opportunities to try different things out. I know in Brunel, a lot of the lecturers, for example, as long as you're friendly with them and aren't per se rude, they wouldn't even mind you just sitting into one of their classes just for you to just test out a new subject, even if it's completely different from your department or course. As long as you get acquainted and build a good rapport, a lot of them usually really don't mind, as long as there's space, as long as you're not being a nuisance. That's a great way to test out new things. During placement year as well, you can do a lot of very different things to what you're actually doing in your course. And it could be sometimes an awakening call in both senses. It could be like, I really enjoy this area, actually. Maybe I'll pursue something more similar to this in the future. Or this area is absolutely not for me. I will not ever do this ever again. Let's do something completely different. Let's get back on track, something like that. So, and even like a lot of competitions and other events, societies, just about everything can give you a big, better insight on a lot of these other fields and subjects that might actually interest you and could be something that you'd be looking into pursuing for further academia.
Yeah, thank you. And we did mention that. It's nice that you bring up placements, because we did mention that placements, postgraduate studies, they sort of give you that opportunity to, like you say, have that career change, learn things. I've always said that my undergraduates give you that opportunity to, or even I guess going to university in general, gives you the opportunity to try something, and then if you really don't like it, that's not for you. So whether it's you're studying, I don't know, biomed, and it turns out you're just I really hate biomed, and actually I really love business management, and I love learning more of the business side of biomed. So working with pharmaceutical companies and managing their, helping them to manage their business. I think that's the really good thing, and it's kind of like what you mentioned there. We always mention on the podcast that networking is sort of really key in doing undergraduates, postgraduates, even like you said, just sitting in other courses, lectures, is really good. So I know a friend of mine, she was passionate about construction and sustainable construction, and with environmental science, they sort of because of the pandemic, we weren't able to do it for our final year. But she got in contact with one of the lecturers that she had for her second year. She said is it okay if I sit in for your module? Because I really liked it. I don't mind if I don't do the assessment, but you've got a lot of insight and knowledge. And he was just that's completely fine. I know for the design part of my master's course, the module there was an optional module which had design elements. And the design lecturers were really nice, because they said, oh, if you still want to join, just send us an email. We're more than happy for you to still be on there. When we're doing assessment stuff, you might just prefer to leave or to just play it in the background. But they were just saying, come along if you want to, because at the end of the day, kind of like what you were mentioning, Jay, you some of the stuff that you're sort of learning on your course, yes, you can learn it on YouTube, or yes, there are courses specific for it, but sometimes you'll have to pay to get that knowledge, and you're sort of getting it for free. You're in that learning mindset anyways. So you're sort of more ready for it than if, for say, you're going to leave it till after you've done years of working, or years of research and stuff. But yeah, we've come to the last assumption, which is a shame, but all things have to.
Wait. Just before you say that, something that you just picked on real quick, just about the mindset that you're in, and about all these subjects. It's easier for yourself to jump into a master's right after you finish your undergraduate, and same thing with the PhD, than if you spend quite a few years in industry. A lot of times sometimes for you, it's just not even worth it, because you might just be able to, instead of wasting a year back in academia, you might be able to just get that promotion instead and do something instead. And you just, by spending maybe even just a year, even students who just go on placement for a year, it's quite a massive difference coming back into education. So it's just a different mindset, a different state of work ethic and everything else. So if you are considering doing a master's, it is preferable for your own sake that you do it right away if you do have the conditions. But at the same time, it is never too late to come back into education if it's something you'd like to pursue, or maybe it's just useful to have maybe a master's in a particular topic. It isn't too late for you to come back. Yeah.
Thank you. And, it's really great. Like, I definitely agree with the mindset thing. I felt the exact same way. That's why I decided to go straight into the masters, because I felt like when you're at uni, you've got that mindset of close deadlines, like you've got 3 different assignments, which are all like 1,500 words on different topics due the same week, and you have to find a way to do it. And that's something that you're sort of honed into while at uni, and to sort of get away from that and go back can sometimes be quite difficult. But yeah, I really like that you sort of mentioned there as well that, there's no sort of like age limit or time limit for you to get back into like studying or to education. I knew a friend of mine, she was doing an undergraduate. She said that there was a about 6-year-old woman who was doing psychology at her university. I know Samuel's mentioned it on the podcast that like there have been people on his course that were sort of like a lot older than him, and they sort of had a career change and wanted to do a master's in psychology. Like, try it. And then the last thing, sort of based on what you said about like placements, I'm currently on placement, and my like placement is helping other student find placements, which is always like confusing when you're trying to describe what your placement is. But essentially, like when you mentioned that there's that difference, it's so true. We like the people were saying, when I was doing my undergrad, and they were sort of advertising placements, they were saying it then that like there's a clear difference between like a student who's gone on placement and a student who hasn't, and whether that's a year or 2 summers or even 1 summer, just going on placement sort of gives you the idea to see what you do and don't like about your studies, because your placement will usually be linked to your studies, but also it sort of shows you like what you can do with your degree and like how it can sort of be applied in the real world, whereas sometimes it can feel like that's something you can't, like you wouldn't necessarily know if you had just sort of like done the 3 years without sort of doing anything else. And I think sort of, we've mentioned it before that we're going to, at some point, do a episode on placements and looking specifically, it's going to be So No One Told You About Placements. So keep an eye out. We're going to be releasing that soon. But the last assumption is essentially postgraduates are similar to undergraduates in terms of workloads and assignments. And essentially, even I would go to this, like the extent to say like the lecture structures, and say that as a postgraduate, you're sort of expected, like it's almost the same as your final year at university. Now Jay, was that an assumption that you had, or that maybe friends or other people on your course maybe had?
To some amount, I very much felt like the masters would have the same continuation from my final year of undergraduate, because at the end of the day, like the major part of it is still that you're doing a thesis. It's different for sure. I forget the word. The expected rigor and professionality is much higher, because as in you are an academically superior level, so they do expect much more from you. Overall, I feel like it's less. It really depends on the universities and the masters. In my experience, it's felt more better managed curriculum wise. The things are more spread out. I don't feel as if I'm bombarded with everything to do. I feel like everything is spaced out quite well. But obviously, the quality of your work has to be much, much better and more professional, and they do expect much, much more from you. So this being maybe from group design, group projects, you aren't expected to put in the same amount of I guess work, as in they do expect you to do much, much more. So maybe you might have had some poor experiences with group work in undergraduate, because people might have not been as passionate, as interested in the course. When you come to master's level, a lot of the people who are here are here because they want to be here. And that does tend to show in the way they work, in the way they participate, the way they engage, both themselves and within the group, in case of projects. So it does tend to be, I don't know, I feel more fulfilled doing what I'm doing in a master's level. As the people I tend to work with, this being both my colleagues and the academics, they tend to be more supporting, more passionate. They actually like what they're doing. They actually want people to succeed. I don't know. I'm not trying to be like very condescending upon undergraduate academia, but it's a jump. It's definitely a jump, but it's good. It's accommodating if you are up for it. If you're up for the extra level of hard work you might need to put in, even if it's not maybe as time heavy as an undergraduate, it is very comfortable if this is something you're what's a good word? I don't know. If it's something you're comfortable with, yeah. It's very
like passionate about.
Yeah, passionate about, yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's true. It links to what we said about the reality that, while this is very dependent, again, on the course and the university, that most students find postgraduates a bit harder, or depending on your course, significantly harder than your undergraduate. Now, this could be due to a number of reasons. So some of the ones that we listed are like the limited time, because obviously for your undergraduate, it's 3 years. Masters is usually 1. If it's 2, then it's sort of like still the work is sort of spread out a bit more evenly. The number of assignments that are conducted within, because of that sort of limited time constraint. But I think, like we were mentioning there, Jay, it's also, the expectation is different, because kind of like what you're mentioning, for an undergraduate, there's, I guess with everything that's been going on, whether it's with COVID or with just jobs being harder, a lot more people applying for jobs because of COVID. It's meant that sort of when it comes to a master, like if it comes to undergraduate, sorry, a lot of people will do an undergraduate because they feel like, oh, I need to at least have an undergraduate to get a job. And kind of like what you said, when it comes to masters, that's not really the case, because a lot of people, yes, some people are saying, for their certain career or whatever, they need to do a master's. But kind of like what you said, it's not that people are just there to have a good time, or people are just like, oh, I don't need to take group work seriously, or, the group will cover for me. There's a lot of that sort of change in expectations, and people saying, oh, actually, no, I need to be serious. I need to sort of take this seriously. I think it's really, like we said, it's about the individual. It's also about that mindset of saying, you sort of, and I guess that sort of links to what we're saying at the start. You don't have to do a master's that's not something that relates to what you studied or something that you don't like, but it's also about thinking, you picked to do that master's and you're there for a reason. And yeah, it's going to be tough, and yeah, you might not enjoy it. But at the end, just keep going, because once you've done it, you'll just be so proud that, you've done it, you did it in something that's new, you've learned new things, or you've sort of like learned further. It's been a further development of ideas that you've had. And I feel like that's something that it's a powerful thing that can happen to you once you sort of come to that point in life. So yeah, no, definitely.
I think it's just the general environment, even if it is maybe a bit harder because it is shorter, you might have to do a bit more things in the same amount of time and less amount of time than an undergraduate. Just the environment, I feel like I definitely feel more supported from an academic point of view here in my master's than I did in my undergraduate. Whether maybe it's my mentality that changed a bit as well. Maybe I'm seeking out help and seeking out resources more often and putting myself out there a bit more, just by being, I guess, more mature than I was in my undergraduate. Or maybe it is just the environment might be a bit different. I do feel it is generally more calmer, as well as, especially like if you have, I guess, good time management. It might still be stressful, but it's not as I don't know. It's not as
like the pressure, like if you, like you said, if you plan out the time, the pressure is not sort of like always on you, mm-hmm. as if when you're doing an undergraduate, because like you mentioned, even if you have your thesis at the end of the year, you've still got all those other deadlines that are sort of like, and especially if you're some courses where your thesis isn't even like towards the end of the academic year, your thesis is like slap bang in the middle. So you basically working from September to maybe like March on your dissertation. And then, like you might be like, oh gosh, the dissertation took so much out of me. It was so tiring. But then you're just like, oh, great. I've got like 3 exams come May that I'm now going to have to start revising for. Is that what you sort of meaning?
I think so. I think so. I think with most masters, dissertation does tend to be towards the end. So you do have generally allocated time for it, and it doesn't usually clash much with everything else that is going on. And I don't know if it's a bit, I feel like just the stakes can be a bit lower as well in a master's, because ultimately, like in an undergraduate, it's almost like you have 3 years going on, and uh, a bachelor's, your marks at the end can at times shape much more than like your career at times than the master's. The master's is usually there to give support and to give further qualifications, but sometimes it's not as big of a deal like how well you do in a master's, as long as you did it like decently, like, and as well as in your undergraduate. The master's is there more as like an additional qualification you have. It's not your main qualification most times, I feel. I don't know. I feel like it's just the stakes seem to be a bit different in a master's than in undergraduate.
No, I definitely agree. And I get that some people might say, kind of like you mentioned, that the stakes might be higher for them because, they might have, like, depending on what they're doing and what their research is, or whether, they're doing a sort of a master's in philosophy or a master's in science or arts. They might feel like the pressure's different. But I think it's like we mentioned, I guess, like you're sort of, rather than with your undergraduate, that you're sort of doing this to sort of better yourself. I mean, you are bettering yourself professionally, but I guess what I'm saying is with an undergraduate, there's the expectation that most people will be doing an undergraduate. But when it comes to a master's, at least at this point, it's sort of like, no, there's such a wide range of masters. You are doing a specific thing that you actually like, and it's not like with a undergraduate where you might like first or second year of your undergraduate, but then third year you're researching stuff that you don't really like at all. It's, you're picking your modules, you're picking stuff that you like, your dissertation is more focused on what you like. And I think it's stuff like that that really essentially is quite useful to you. Which sort of leads to the advice, which is essentially, plan out your time. If your course is able to let you know when you join in September, or we've got a January intake now, so if they let you know now what your deadlines will be for the rest of the academic year, then amazing, because then you can sort of like figure out which weeks will have deadlines and all of this. But I think even like more so just knowing how to like plan out your time effectively to make sure that if, like I said, you've got 3 pieces of coursework and they're all due at the same week, how can you sort of cope with that? I also said, like, ask questions if you don't understand something. It's something that I guess still works for undergraduate, but I think sometimes when it comes to a master's, because like I said, that you're sort of going it's a new level that you're sort of on. Sometimes you feel like, oh, if you ask like a simple question, or if it's something that is a simple topic and you ask a question, you feel like, oh, I'm sort of like, I'm showing that I'm not really, I'm struggling with the course, or I'm not really as smart as I want to be. And it's like, there are some things that you will understand and some things that you won't. And especially if it's something new, like I know, for example, when I was doing the design module for my master's, for that module, there were some things that were just going over my head. There were some stuff that I was just like, yeah, I'm gonna have to ask the lecturer about this when we have our like our seminars with him. But I was just like, no, it's about having, like, being comfortable asking questions, and the most important thing is there's no stupid question, one, and two, you never know, someone else might be thinking the exact same thing and just not want to ask. But yeah, I'd say that's our main advice. Just plan out your time and ask questions if you don't understand anything, or if you're struggling with something. And yeah, use the support services. We've mentioned Ask Brunel, who do a lot of work on dissertations. They do a lot of stuff on statistics and things like that. If your course is really nice at Brunel, they might even invite your lecturer might, sorry, invite them to attend a set, like do a session with your cohort or your course, to just basically, tell you about them and sort of do like a live session there. If you're thinking about like applying for stuff afterwards, you could maybe go to the careers team at your university or at Brunel. But yeah, just like make the most of it, because kind of like what we were saying there, a postgraduate is your decision. It's something that you've decided you want to do to improve your I guess academic record, and don't feel like you're sort of missing out.
And I feel like as well, like obviously it's not mandatory. Like you don't have to go into a master's except for particular fields where they do demand you to do a master's. It is a thing. Like you shouldn't uh, master's great. At the same time, you should be putting in good effort, good work in your undergraduate, because it is like if you are wanting to go into further education, your overall marks and your transcript from undergraduate will carry you through most of further education beyond that. Um, Once you're able to tap into most masters, you can just, like we said earlier, you can just do basically any subject, as long as you have good marks and good transversal skills. Whereas you might do really well in a master's, but maybe that won't be enough to get you to maybe some a completely different course, for example. Whereas your undergraduate might really help out more. So it's not something you should really neglect. Just say, oh, when I get to my master's, I'll fix all my career issues. It's going to guarantee a career for me. Like you should still be like putting in good work and effort, especially into your bachelor's, playing it out, having good time management, all these things. It is things that do tend to help.
Definitely. And kind of what you mentioned there, it's even like you said, time management is something that you will need to, in time management, meeting deadlines, keeping on top of workloads. These are all things that when it comes to employability and working, we mentioned in our job hunting episodes, for after graduations, sort of similar things of having those transferable skills essentially sort of help you afterwards. So if you can show that, and especially during interviews, people love to ask questions of, can you name a time when, you had a lot of deadlines and you sort of had to figure out something. You can use that as an example to say that, you're doing your masters, you had like multiple deadlines that week, you had to also figure out, where you would like be working after you finish your masters or things like that, and sort of showing that you were able to manage that workload, all like organizations and workplaces will be really inspired by that, because they'll see that you're a good candidate. So I definitely agree. And yeah, I definitely feel like for anyone who's doing a master's, yeah, there's a bit of encouragement for you.
One last thing as well. I know you
Go
mentioned
ahead.
ask. I know one thing as well that you shouldn't be neglecting is if you have any learning difficulties as well. Brunel does offer quite a bit of learning support. This could be for dyslexia, dyspraxia, ADHD, and most other things of that sort. And you shouldn't be like, it can feel weird to come out with these issues sometimes to your academics or to the staff. Usually it will be in this case, the learning disability staff will help you, but the support they can give you is substantial, and it will make your overall academic journey much more smoother. And you shouldn't be like putting yourself, what's the word, putting yourself down, making your situation worse, making your situation less fair for yourself, and putting yourself at a disadvantage in comparison to some of your colleagues. When there is support, the support is there, the support is substantial, and it's something you should access if you have the need for it. And it does go a long way. Grinnell is one of the better universities in terms of support for these things. So if you do need the support, it is out there for you. Just the only thing you have to do is reach out to get it.
Definitely. And, we mentioned it, I think we mentioned it in an episode. Well, we had an episode about, a student who sort of had the same thing. They had learning difficulties. They didn't know until I think about their second year. But they were saying that, they used the team at Brunel, they used their resources, and they really helped them in their final year. And, we even said that concerning someone on the team, Michelle, that she said the same thing, that she only found out that she had a learning difficulty once she had graduated. And she was just like, it would have been amazing to have used that support, to use those, those support services to have that extra support in exams and coursework to help with that. So I think, yeah, definitely that's so true. Utilize those resources. That episode that I mentioned about supporting people with learning difficulties. We speak a lot about how that works and what essentially entails and things like that. So please do check it out. It should hopefully pop up on one of the corners in the screen. But yeah, all things must come to an end, and this is the end of the episode. So yeah, thank you very much, Jay, for being an amazing guest speaker and for coming onto the podcast today. It's been a pleasure to speak to you about postgraduate studies and to learn more about postgraduate studies and learn some key tips too. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a shame this one we didn't have as many festive anecdotes as the last one. We had so many fun facts about Christmas.
Yeah, no, it's true, and I'll make sure we'll have a fun fact appear on this episode too. So don't worry, just keep an eye on the screen and you'll either see it at the start or it'll appear now. But you'll see a fun fact here too. So yeah, you won't be missing out on much. But I guess before we let you go, Jay, there might be some students who might have some more questions. Maybe it might be about yourself, but it might also be about, the residence ambassadors or Res Life ambassadors, sorry, and the work that they do and how they could support students who have moved to the UK or are living away from home for the first time, and they're on campus, especially for anyone in the January starters, and they might be wondering a bit more about them. So yeah, could you just let us know? I guess the first thing is how our audience could get in contact with you, but also a bit more about the Res Life ambassadors and how our audience could get in contact with them.
So the Res Life ambassadors I am no longer associated with, but they are a service at university. They do their best to help out students moving into accommodation and just generally living in halls. They are there and effectively your professional friend. You can get in contact with them either through email at Aurora2 at brunel.ac.uk or through their Instagram at brunel.ras, Res Life ambassadors. They do tend to be going around halls as well, at least twice a week. You should see them around. They are based in Concourse Hall, and we do have, as in we don't, they do. They do have the Faraday Common Room, which they do host quite a few activities. To get in contact with me, I think the best way to do it is probably through LinkedIn. You could probably add my LinkedIn somewhere in the description for people to contact me. Is probably the easiest way.
Perfect. Thank you. And yeah, thank you to you, our wonderful audience, for coming back for another episode. If you like this episode, a like, comment, and subscribe is always appreciated. If you want to know when the next episode's coming up and you don't want to miss it, please click the notification bell. And finally, if you're interested in receiving some perks as well as supporting the podcast, because we can't do this without all your support, then please do feel free to check our Patreon page. The link is in the description. But yeah, we're wishing you all a great day. We'll see you all next time when we learn something new that no one told us. So that's bye from us here. Have a great day.